Good afternoon, everybody. You can hear me fine? So welcome to our 55 Plus Options Life After Law event. Thank you very much for attending, and hello to everybody watching on video at home. This is an event for solicitors to look at all kinds of opportunities open to people in their later stages of their career, 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond. So we have a lot of wonderful speakers today. So I'm Shane Farrell. I'm just doing a quick presentation. We have Dr. Edward Kelly from the Third Act. We have Kieran McKinney representing Age and Opportunity. Peter Kavanagh can't be here. We have May Quaid representing Active Retirement. Derek Bell from Retirement Planning Council. Tom Kennedy from Mercer. And then Rory O'Boyle from the Diploma Centre. So just for this afternoon, this slide kind of represents the context of today's event. Previous generations with youth, adulthood and old age, very, very simple. But now we have our current generation, we're living longer. So we're looking at this later life, the 15 to 25 years, and at the ages 50 to 75, where you have more options to decide what you want to do, no rules. It's a very important period to do what you want, when you want, and how you want to do it. So what do you do? What options are open to you? So you can retire but remain active, semi-retire 2 or 3 days a week, working 2 or 3 days off, study full-time, part-time. I believe there was a 97-year-old student at Trinity that just finished his degree in 2016. So if he can do it, we can all do it. Set up in business, small hobby, specialist, anything from photography to the farmers' markets, or you continue working, which will certainly be gone through later on today. It's important to realise that there are different ways of living this later life. So this afternoon you're going to hear about portfolio careers. You have the option of self-employment. It's a big opportunity for, wrong slide. It's a big opportunity for leisure time, for extended travel breaks. You can pursue personal interests. You have an option to take over directorships. There's a lot of organisations out there that will take your hand off for legal experience. And there's the option to volunteer. So just looking at 2 characters that encapsulates this. So George Hook, catering and sports commentator. George stumbled into a second career of sports commentary. It was a passion of his anyway. That then turned into radio broadcasting. He actually had 3 careers, so 2 later lives. And Gerard Maguire. Gerard was a solicitor in his 50s. He had enough of law and decided his love was wine, so he wanted to jump into wine. He started studying wine, established his own wine shop. Now he finds himself engrossed in fine food and fine wines. So, without further ado, I'm just going to send you over to Dr. Edward Kelly for the first presentation of this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. I played 9 holes of golf this morning with 2 lawyer friends of mine, 2 solicitors, 2 well-known solicitors. Probably you'll know them. And I was telling them about the 7th hole. I said, yeah, actually, I'm going into the Law Society this afternoon. And he said, what are you going in there for? And I said, well, I'm going in to talk about, solicitors who are winding down their practices or considering retirement. And they were saying, well, don't tell them that you were out playing with us. We'd probably know them. But anyway, depending how we got on, I might share that with you. I was thinking back in 1983, I was a solicitor's apprentice in McCann Fitzgerald's in Fitzwilliam Square at the time, and many of you remember some of the wonderful people that were there. I saw the Michael O'Mahony room down there, Michael, Petrea MacDonald, Helen Collins, Billy Cook. It was a wonderful place, and I really enjoyed working there, but I wasn't ready to take on life as a professional lawyer or a solicitor. So I bolted. I headed off to Australia. Took 6 months leave from McCann's, but didn't come back for about 7 years. Needless to say, my articles were torn up somewhere, and I never completed my apprenticeship. I went on to do other things, did an MBA, came back, did an MBA in the UK, came back to Ireland, set up a business in the telecom sector, got married, had 4 kids, then had a sort of a midlife crisis where I thought, is there something else? Is there something more? So I left my business, or sold it to some younger members, and went back to study. Went to Trinity to do a doctorate, and eventually finished that. Crawled out of a university in the north of England about 8 or 10 years later with a PhD, a shadow of my former self. I was totally minced by the system. Then I sort of started working in leadership development, people development, and then suddenly I find myself next month turning 60. And I'm thinking, how did that happen? How did that... Where did those... And then I was thinking, today particularly, I could be in the audience because I could have made some different choices. And perhaps 36 years ago, I would have pursued being a solicitor. And how would that have turned out? So then I looked, it reminded me of a story of a friend of mine in college, and he went home to his dad, and he said, Dad, I've got to start thinking about my career. And his dad said to him, what, your career? He was only in college. He said, John, your career is something you look back on, And there was something quite wise about that, because you make a decision and then you follow and take another decision, and then suddenly you find yourself, here we are at this stage, thinking about winding down. But I want to challenge some of that, because I was looking at that image, So the image is of 2 people out, perhaps in the Wicklow Mountains, heading for Lugnaquilla, and their backs are turned towards us. So they're going away, they're leaving, they're disconnecting, they're disassociating, disengaging, and they're off. They've got a heavy pack on their back, they've got sleeping mats, perhaps they've got a tent, but the point about it is that they're leaving. And then beside it, it's not on this, is Life After Law, and it's a 55 plus options event. And I was thinking, yeah, but what's that all about? Then I started reading down, and the event is for solicitors who are winding down and possibly retiring. And I thought, well, why would you be winding down? And why would you be retiring? What's that about? Retirement comes from the French verb retirer, to withdraw to a place of safety and seclusion, which is probably not a great place to spend 25, 30 years of life. Because down below, some of the issues that are raised are really going to be more relevant to what I want to talk about. It says, first one, implications of dramatically extended life expectancy. So I want to comment on that. The next one was the choice between traditional retirement and something alternative. So I think perhaps what I want to talk about, the third act, is in the space of something alternative. The Encore career social trend, you're probably familiar with that, and you'll be able to Google that and see that really the Encore career trend is arising because of human longevity. Portfolio careers, then the seizing the opportunity to do what you've always dreamed of doing. That's an interesting one. And then the option to unretire. So if I could just say something about that, because the implications of dramatically extended life expectancy, absolutely right. So we're living on average 25 to 30 years longer than our great-grandparents. We've been adding 2.5 years in longevity per decade for the last 150 years. So as I think one of the slides showed, the traditional arc of our lives has completely changed. So there's this new period with 25 perhaps to 30 years. It doesn't really fit with the second act of your life, but it's not old age either. So what is it? Well, it's Encore career, it's portfolio career, it's the third act. It's certainly a new stage that's different. And if you're not thinking about it in that way, you perhaps are going to drift into it being just a sort of an extension of what you've been doing. So the extended life expectancy is a new fact of life. And I think, that lovely quote from John Milton Keynes, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? Well, the facts of life have changed. And I think perhaps we need to change too. The second point then was the choice between traditional retirement and something alternative. Traditional retirement really has no place in the modern world because life has just changed so much around us. You can't continue to think the same way as perhaps we did when we were growing up in a system where our parents, they had the first act in life growing up, education, second act in life being career, family, raising your family. The third act was retirement and old age. It just doesn't fit anymore because somebody's moved the cheese. The third point about the encore career social trend. Well, the encore career social trend is as it sounds. It's a new career or something different, something new, something different in this stage of your life. And that's arising because of human longevity. And it is interesting that in the US at least, the highest percentage of entrepreneurs are coming from the 55 to 65 age group, and not the 25 to 35 age group as you would imagine. So what's going on there? Well, it's not just because there isn't sufficient funds available through state security and stuff. The other thing is people are finding that they want to do. They have the time. They're interested. They have the energy. They have the experience. The other thing is that if you're an entrepreneur starting off, age 55 to 65, you're 70%, you have a much higher percentage chance of succeeding compared to somebody, 25 to 35, which of course makes sense because you've traveled the road, you have the experience, you have the knowledge, and perhaps you're not going to take such wild risks. The other thing, portfolio careers, does anybody know where that term came from? It was actually invented by an Irishman, a well-known Irishman from Kildare, Charles Handy. Some of you might be familiar with Charles Handy. Charles Handy attended our first Third Act conference and he left a nice quote. He said, "This third age is not worth living in if you're not acting in it," which was a nice memory of his visit. Seizing the opportunity to do what you've always dreamed about. That seems like a great thing, yeah. If only I had the time, if only I had the space, I would do all these things I dreamed about. There's something in between the sort of shift that occurs between the second or third act. It's not really about the dream, it's more about the awakening. Young had that line, "Who looks out dreams, who looks in awakens." So it's much more sort of important. If you're going to have a new stage of life, it's not about following a dream. It's much more about awakening to a new sense of what's possible. So I'll talk a little bit about that because it's relevant to the third act. The final one about the option to unretire. This is an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? I wasn't familiar with this until a speaker at the Third Act conference started talking about people unretiring. I thought, that's great, what's that? But then I found out that a third of all federal employees in the US are unretiring. So they're getting to the promised land and they're finding out it's not so great. If you have one holiday or two holidays a year, it's really nice because it's a break from what you're doing. But if you're on holiday all the time, it gets a bit boring. Endless golf is a bit tedious. Cruises around here and there every so often are nice, but if you're doing it all the time, it just becomes mindless, or not less mindless isn't the word, but it becomes not terribly fulfilling. So when you've cleaned out the house, when you've taken out the bookshelves and you've done your second yoga course and your new Japanese course, what then? What's next? You've got to find some meaning or purpose that's going to... And that's at the level of intention. So I want to talk a little bit about that too. Because the unretiring is not just driven by a desire to continue to fund your lifestyle. It's also driven by a desire to connect or reconnect and to have something that really kind of keeps you motivated. So I also want you to think about some of the language that we use, because language represents meaning. It's not the thing in itself. Philosophically, there's the phenomena and the noumenon. The noumenon is the thing in itself. The language is the representation of the meaning. Okay? And it's very important because when you use language, language is representing meaning, which also motivates action. Right, so if I say I am retiring, everybody knows what that means. And then I kind of have to act on what I'm saying. So mine means I'm heading off I'm withdrawing, I'm leaving. If I say I'm in transition, it has a very different feel about it. First of all, people treat you differently. And I treat myself differently. I'm now in the space between questions and answers. I don't have to have all the answers when I'm in a period of transition. It's like a research period. I'm allowed space. When my sister retired last year, she came up with this idea of the 4 seasons. So when people were asking her what she was doing, she said, "Oh, I'm going to observe the 4 seasons." And they were all quite taken with that because, first of all, it sounds a bit highbrow and it sounds a bit sort of... It also just got them away because people are asking and you're coming up with an answer and suddenly you find yourself, you're speaking, you're acting on what you've said. So we really need to watch our language because language represents meaning which motivates action. So careful of the use of the word age, because what's that about? Every age, there's every age. We're age at every age. Retirement, careful of the use of that word because it was created at a time when circumstances were different. Remember that definition of retirement, to withdraw to a place of safety and seclusion. Retirer, from the French verb. Not a great place, perhaps, to spend 25, 30 years of life. So I want to just spend a little bit of time, if I can, just introducing the concept of the third act. And it's very much in line with what's already been introduced in terms of Encore careers. It's that space between. So if we look at the third act is a creation of human longevity. It's also a new phenomenon of our time. Never before have so many people in such numbers lived for so long. So we have this unique figuring out of what this all means because the traditional arc of our life is so changed. So we've now this new period and we've no definitions for it. We've no descriptions for it. We've no accurate roadmap for it. You think of what was involved in the transition that you had from the first to the second act in life. Like everyone had a stake in your development. Your hormones were pulling you, your parents were pushing you, society was educating you, organizations were willing to train you. When you come to the end of the second act, nothing, nobody, you're on your own. The best definition we have for it is retirement, which is like this, it's a going away. But why? That might have been appropriate at another time, but it's not appropriate now. So that's the first thing. The third act is a sort of a new container, if you like the Encore career idea. It's a new way of thinking and framing this important period in life. And if you don't know what it is, you're in the right space, right? Because it's a new phenomenon of our time. And you're going to have to figure it out. So the second point is that everyone who lives long enough will have a third age, but not everybody who lives long enough will have a third act. So that tells you something else is going on in here. You can be the passive recipient of improvements in life conditions and have a third age. Nobody's going to interfere with that. But if you're going to have a third act, you've got to do something yourself. You've got to make an internal transition. You've got to go through this inquiry to work out what's involved in making this shift in yourself, in shifting the underlying intentions about your beliefs, attitudes, assumptions, self-images. It's quite a lot of work. And understandably, most people don't want to do it, But the third act, if you're going to have a third act, you've got to do this transition work. So it's not simply about rearranging the deck chairs, It's about changing the direction internally. The third thing is that I want to say about it is that the third act is also a call to elderhood. It's a call to eldership. And it's a request to change the word retirement and replace it with the word eldership. Elders in traditional communities were not just the older people, they were the grown-ups. They were the wiser people. You'd think we'd be the wisest society ever at the moment, wouldn't you? Because we have so many older people. Our elders are absent. They're not present. They've been dismissed. They're on the margins. So the third act is a call to change that, is to bring back the concept of eldership, elderhood, so that elders, people who are moving into this stage of life, can stay engaged, can stay active, and stay involved. Can I just say something a little bit about, I'll see if we've got a little bit of time left for one or two questions, about the process of transition. We're talking about an internal transition. We're not talking about what you do. We're talking about having a look at what is going on that motivates your actions, right? And in all transitions, there are 5 stages. The content of your transition is your own, as in your own experience of it. But the stages, there's archetypal stages in transition. And the first one is the wake-up call. You have to have a wake-up call. Now, most of the time we deny the wake-up call because we inherently know that's going to involve some of this uncomfortableness. But if you don't get the wake-up call, you can't start on the journey. And anything I say after this is going to be of no interest to you. The wake-up call comes either externally or internally. Externally, it can come with retirement, with redundancy, with loss of health, with loss of wealth, loss of partner. Or internally, it comes with a sense of an existential crisis. You know, an existential crisis is a crisis of existence, a crisis of your beingness. What matters now? Who am I? You know, when the structures are pulled away, the architecture of your second act, your family grow up and leave. Not a bad thing, you know, mostly, but they do create a void. Then the structures of your career or your life, that seems to fall away. And what are you left with? Well, you're left with space. You're left with possibly with the void. And all sorts of new things come up that need to be addressed. I mean, let's keep that down. I don't want to do that. That's hard work. So inevitably we try to suppress it. However, if you take the call, you can start on to the next stage, which is the search. And the search is for a new meaning or purpose to underpin this next stage of your life. That is, there's no time frame on that. In fact, there's no time frame on an internal inquiry, and not in the sense of linear time. You know, some people get it quickly, other people it takes time. Anyway, it's a signal you're on. The search is that you find yourself going to courses. You find yourself reading differently. You're in the self-help section of the bookshop on a Saturday afternoon, looking around, hoping nobody sees you. You know, you're opening up, you're curious, you're looking, you're beginning to think about what's next. Who am I and what's next? Third stage is the struggle. The struggle is always with yourself. The struggle is that sort of, it's like taking an elevator down into what Yeats called the rag and bone shop of the heart, where you realize there's something you need to let go of, or there's something that you need to learn. The letting go is the letting go of all those early assumptions, adaptations that you made, beliefs, attitudes that are perhaps more relevant to your second act than to your third act. You've got to do some shit. It's like you're going on a Ryanair flight, you know, and you can only bring cabin baggage. But you need to sort through the other baggage to know what stuff to bring and what stuff to leave behind. Fourth stage is the breakthrough, and it's often presented as coming through a tunnel. Because, you know, you do need to do this stuff on your own. Now, others can facilitate you, support you, but you've got to do this inquiry on your own. You have the responsibility, the self-responsibility for doing this work. You come through and you come out, the breakthrough, you have a new sense of identity, a new sense of who you are, where you are at this stage of your life. You're ready to move on. The final stage is the integration and return home. And in the integration, in all the mythical stories of this, and all in the modern developmental psychology versions of it, this is often the trickiest part, because you've made an internal shift in yourself. You've changed the kind of sense of who you are, and not everybody around you likes it. You know, I had a very nice story with a lady who was on one of my programs, the transition program. I was asking her after 2 months how she was getting on. She said, I went home, I went to see my mother who was alive. So this lady was in her 60s. She brought up her children. Her mother was still alive and her mother-in-law was still alive. So she said, I went to see my mother the other day, and she said, are you still doing that program with that fella? You know? Her daughter then said to her, Mum, I was up with the mother-in-law. She said to me, the mother-in-law said to the daughter, your mother has changed. You know? These two elderly dames had fully expected that this lady was going to have more time to look after them. She, having looked after her children, looked after her mother, suddenly thought, I'm at this age and stage, I need some time for me. And she was beginning to explore what that was. And she was not finding it easy because nobody around her had ever seen her in this way. So you have to be really careful with this stuff. When you do make a shift, it is going to have implications for others around you. Don't want to get into the thorny area of relationships, but you know, divorces are increasing in the third act. Quick question. What was the average marriage length in the Victorian era? Shoot me a number.
20.
Not far off. 15 years. Yeah, so 15 years. And it wasn't because people didn't like each other. It's because they didn't live that long. So now it's not unusual to see relationships lasting for 30, 40 years sometimes. And I heard this lady in London speak about this recently, about will this next generation really think, when they're going up the aisle, that this is till death us do part? I mean, 50 years of this? Well, I mean, and you're getting married in your 20s when you don't know anything, you know. So all of these things are going to change. So when you make this shift, you have to try and bring others with you. Because, you know, you're going to have ripple effects around you. I'm not saying you need permission to, you don't, but it's perhaps no harm to share that with those people around you, so that they will support you as you make this sort of journey. So look, I'd just like to sum up, and perhaps there's any immediate question, just to say that the third act is just a response to human longevity. Somebody has moved the goalposts. We didn't ask for it. We didn't really recognize that it was happening. It's kind of crept up on us. But go and do a life expectancy sort of test online, and you'll find, boom, you know, it could be out to 90. Wow. Here are the stats. If you're 65 today, you have a 50% chance of living to 90. Now, does that change the way you think about what your stage you're at and what you're doing? Last year, or a few years ago, there was a book in London, some of you might have seen it, two economists, on the 100-year life. 100-year life? Are you serious? I never grew up with the notion of a 100-year life. The Japanese government took it seriously, though. They've set up a council as part of the Japanese government, and the Prime Minister is chairing it to prepare society in Japan for the 100-year life. In 1971, there was 339 people in Japan age 100 or more. There's 65,000 now. What is going on? You know? Now, it's still a big population of 150 million, so it's not a lot, actually, but the point is that this longevity dividend, which is the great gift of modernity, perhaps the greatest social achievement that we've had over the last 150 years, is having tremendous ripple effects on us socially, organisationally, but of course personally. So we need to upgrade our thinking on things. We need to sort of reflect on this and think about it. And here's the thing. If you drift into it, you're going to have a third age. Nothing wrong with it. Nobody's going to knock you on the door and say, you're having a third age. But there's something different. If you're going to have a third act, you need to pause and you need to make a transition. You need to go through that. You need to upgrade your consciousness or awareness of the world. You need to change, perhaps, or see what emerges of who you are now and how you are going to work and live in this new stage of your life. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to free up the energy to do it. Because it's a new gift of life, it's a new gift of time, but you need the energy for it. And if you're going to use your energy just to keep yourself the way you were, I'm not sure that's going to happen. And the final thing is really a call to action, because it's not just about yourself. We need this generation of people to re-engage in society. Currently our elders, as I said, are absent. So I've written an article on this called, more eldership, less leadership, please. Because we need our elders to re-engage. We need to, use the models of Mary Robinson, of people like that who are, really impacting society in a very positive and humane way. And they're leading. They're not reverting to being teenagers, They're not ticking off a bucket list of things to do before I die. Things you should have done probably when you're in your 20s, So it's a much more serious thing, because my sense is that this particular cohort of people are perhaps the only ones capable of really addressing the big issues that are arising, because they have the knowledge, the experience, but they're not giving permission because they're being dismissed. They're being removed, both by their own actions and by society's attitudes. So that's really the three things I wanted to say. And, you know, if for anybody who is interested, we have run ongoing transition programs, as I know, as Kieran does as well. And you're welcome to. We've had a number of lawyers come on those as individuals. I haven't managed to interest any firms in this yet, but individuals are coming. So that's available, and I just wanted to thank you for, and take if there's time for a question, please ask any. Thank you.
Hi folks, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about age and opportunity and some of the work and programs that we have on offer for people who are 50 plus. But I'd like to start with a question. What age is old? What age is old? Go on, just throw out a number.
95.
95, okay.
110. Well, the oldest lady in the world, she was on the news there about a month ago, and she's 113 or something,
Yeah.
and she was asked, what was the best time in your life? And she said, the present.
Good. So, somebody who was 109 was asked, what's the best thing about being 109? She said, the lack of peer pressure. But when I ask you what age is old, usually, you know, like if I'm often working with a younger cohort of people, and people will say, 50 or, 30 or 60. And it reminds me of the days when, in the early days of HIV, I was working in London in HIV service provision. And we'd be going like council by council, and people would be saying, well, it's only promiscuous people who are at risk. So then we'd kind of dig into that and go, well, what's promiscuous? And of course, what they meant was, well, somebody who's having more sex than me. So old is the same thing. It's really subjective. It's not an objective measure at all. And for most of us, somebody old is somebody who's about 20 years older than we are, no matter what age we are. Does that make sense? So we keep pushing that boundary out. So at Age and Opportunity, we've been... The screen's gone dead. We've been... Okay. Well, I'm happy enough to use that. Yeah, sure. So we've been part of the movement for redefining older age in Ireland, and you're going to hear from Active Retirement Ireland later today as well. But in part of redefining what it is to be older, we've also begun thinking about redefining what it is to retire. And what the options are for any of us as we hit 50 and onwards. And like Ed, I turned 60 this year, and like many of my age group, actually retirement at 65 isn't an option, either one that I want or certainly one that I can afford. So there is this whole sense of, well, actually, I hope to have at least another 10 or 20 years where I can be actually still continuing to make a contribution to society. So at Age and Opportunity, we just want to be part of bringing about a society where older people, and that is people who are 50 plus, have a dynamic life, and where we can actually, in fact, be more visible, more active, and more connected, and having more fun. So that's our vision. And in this today, what I'd like to do then is to talk to you just a little bit about one of our programs, which we call Changing Gears. And it's a program designed to work on and help build resilience and help us to deal with life's transitions. Now, why do you think we'd be calling something a course on resilience and life's transitions? How many of you have experienced a transition in life?
I grew up.
Well, precisely. How many of you have had kids?
Yes, sir.
That's a big transition, isn't it? Some of us might have experienced loss, like the death of a partner, the death of a family member, the death of a parent. They're all transitions. And so in this room, already we have a group full of people who have experienced hundreds of transitions. And through this program in Changing Gears, what we try to do is to go along this journey with everybody in the group saying, what have you learned about what's happened to you already? What were the resources that you had in place? What are the resources you might want to have in place now going forward? And I really like your analogy, Ed, of the Ryanair suitcase. That can be about, okay, maybe I have been walking along with a big wheelie case, and maybe now going into the next stage of life, I'm going to be taking less. But we certainly encourage people to look at, what do I want to leave behind? And well, what do I want to bring forward with me into this next phase of life? For some of us, a life transition can be, involuntary redundancy. And I think many of us would know that there can be a real challenge in getting back into full-time work if you're 50 plus, unless you set up your own business. Does that ring a bell with people? Yeah, but in Europe, the reason we talk about being an older person at 50 plus is there is a huge concern and interest in older workers. And as you said, Ed, a huge concern in keeping us actually in the workplace as well. Not least because of the experience that we all bring, but in fact because Europe has decided they need us to stay working for longer. Now, for how many of you is that a prospect that you're interested in? Okay, yeah, good. There's a few hands going up and stuff. So in Changing Gears, what we do is we don't just see it. We don't say it's a course for preparing for retirement. What we say is it's a program to prepare for any kind of a transition, one of which might be retirement, but that's only one of the options. And certainly, just like Shane, your first slide, we're very aware that in fact there are all kinds of now options that we can consider bringing into our lives as we hit, say, 60, 65 or 70. But I'd like to just think for a few minutes about what is a key characteristic of a transition event. And one of them can be that they're often undesirable. Does that ring a chord? It can be the thing that happened that we weren't expecting. It can be the thing that happened perhaps when we didn't feel in control of all of the situations. It can be the thing that, for instance, if it's death or whatever, that's very often something that we don't wish for. We might have had some warning it was going to happen, but it's how we deal with it. So the more that we can think of a life transition as, for instance, being predictable or unpredictable, or where I have more control rather than it being uncontrollable, the more that I can help it be typical rather than atypical, the more that I can perhaps influence something to be gradual rather than sudden, the more I am going to be able to deal with an upcoming transition. And in Changing Gears, that's precisely what we aim to do with you over a 3-day period. And really this is about looking at, well, what is my sense of myself? What is my sense of purpose? And who am I? As you said, Ed, who am I at this stage of my life? And have my beliefs, has my world belief changed? Certainly mine has. When I was in my 20s, I was so devout, my parents really worried about me. And they were absolutely scared that I was going to become a priest. And that's practically what I did do. I applied to join the Jesuits. In the end, I didn't. But, now I wouldn't even say I'm a Christian. So that's been a huge shift for me. And I would say many people in Ireland, would have had similar shifts. And I would say the only thing about that is I've had to then find a new place for myself and how I see myself in the world. And that is a wonderful opportunity if we can drive that, rather than just finding ourselves, hey-ho, yeah, I gave up that and actually I have nowhere to go now. Does that ring a bell with you? So, and we kind of frame this in the sense of being resilient. Because being resilient is our ability to bounce back. But when we fall and bounce back up again, do you think we land in the same place? No, we don't. We land in another place. So it's like that phrase, you can't step in the same water when the stream is running, or I've totally misquoted that, but you know what I mean. Like life carries on. So we have to find a way of getting back in there, and it's not all going to be the same. But the more that we can shape that is going to be far better for us. So in this program, we look at my life up to now, and then we look at the here and now, and then we look at mapping the future. where to from here. And with this programme, we deliver it in two ways. We can deliver it to people as individuals, but we also offer it to firms so that you can bring us in and we work with a cohort of your workforce. And we also have an additional programme, which we now call Age Well, Age Better, which is where, following taking part in Changing Gears, we have another programme called Touchstone, which we developed to promote and to facilitate people to have better skills in active citizenship. So we can do that either with individuals or indeed from a workforce cohort as well, so that we can go through this second stage of facilitation and actually then mentoring people, becoming more active in your communities, doing the things you want to do. So if you feel that that's in any way attractive, well, you know how to get in touch with us. It's Agent Opportunity.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. You can see who I am from the screen, and what I'm going to do is take it to a very practical level of things to think about and things to do when you're looking at retirement. So first of all, who are we? We're a not-for-profit organisation, a registered charity. We're around since 1978, so we must be doing something right. We run courses, 2-day courses every week in Dublin. We run courses less frequently throughout the country: Sligo, Galway, Limerick, Cork, Waterford, Kilkenny, and anywhere else there's demand. And we run one-to-one courses for people. So what we do in our 2-day courses, we tend to have modules, and I'll talk a little bit more about them, supported by a slide deck. In a one-to-one course, it's more of a facilitated discussion, and here's the slide to support what we're talking about. So it's very much focused on the individual and hopefully their partner, if they have one, or a close family member, because retirement affects the family as well as the individual who's retiring, and often family members get forgotten in the process. So some time ago, we did some research. We talked to people before they did our courses, and these were the numbers. And really, a lot of people were concerned about finance. And as is the case with most people, will I have enough money to last me the rest of my days? And if you look at it, the spending pattern of people who retire, it tends to peak immediately after retirement. Those things we wanted to do, travel and so much activities. Then it tends to plateau. So they've done a lot of the things that they want to do. Maybe health isn't quite as good as it was. They're not as mobile as they were. And then it may peak again if you have to purchase care. So it tends to be up, flat, and up. And a lot of people worry financially. Will I have enough? And we looked at this. 65% were most concerned about managing financially. After they did the course, we again surveyed people, and most people changed their mind. And what they were looking at really was that the biggest challenge would be managing the transition. And the issue really is not money, the issue is time. So if you think of your working week, if you take commute time plus working time, you will have more than likely a minimum of 50 hours a week involved with work. So once you retire, you get those 50 hours back, and that's 50 hours a week, every week, for as long as you live. So lots of people would say to us, I'm going to play golf. Well, yeah, you may play golf, but you won't play golf for a minimum of 50 hours a week, and you certainly won't be playing golf on a dark, wet November day. So it's thinking about things that you want to do and are able to do in the next stage. So what do? We have a 2-day open course that I've referred to. We do executive 1-to-1 or 1-to-2. We also have a course called Working On, which is for people who finish one career and want to do something else. This is a 1-day course taking CVs, interviews, job searching skills. We also have Start Your Own Business. We've recently started doing retirement weekends in Westport, so Friday evening to Sunday lunchtime, in response to people who are self-employed. So looking at it, I was thinking, if I was self-employed, would I give up 2 days of work, 2 days of earning to go and do a retirement course? Probably not. Would I go away with my partner from Friday night to Sunday lunchtime? Probably would. So we've moved into that space to help people and to provide the training to people who might otherwise not attend. We developed a new course called Facing into Change, which touches on some of the stuff you've heard from the other speakers already. We run a course on genealogy and family history, very different to traditional genealogy courses, in that, yes, we do the technical stuff of tracing the dates of family members, but we also have the services of a school teacher who helps people write the story of the history. So it's not just born and died, it's Uncle Joe fought in the Somme or whatever it was. And then your new lifestyle mission is a course that's around, I suppose the nearest thing would be to say it's like Operation Transformation. It's around health and setting yourself goals in that space. So a wide range of offerings. You can have a look at them all on the website rpc.ie. Everything is there, including prices, dates. You can book and pay online. Moving on to what makes a happy retirement. So these are the key things: positive attitude to the future, clear vision of the type of life you want, mental and physical. What do you think of as work? Nurturing relationships, be active socially, and that's not Facebook or Twitter, it's real people. How to have a balanced approach. So often when people leave the world of work, they get involved in something. It's like the pendulum swings too far. They get besotted with something, and the pendulum has to readjust. So having that balance, and it's also about maintaining your financial comfort. So many people think of retirement like the iceberg. Finance is the bit they think about, but that's the bit that's visible or immediate, and there are also emotional, psychological and lifestyle issues that one needs to think about. And I'll touch on some of these as we go through. So one of the big tips in terms of retirement is to learn to say no. And that's while you're still at work, so not taking on new stuff, but actually saying, no, there's no point in me doing that because I'm not going to be around to see that through to completion. It's just making people aware, but it's also about saying no once you actually leave the world of work, because people will make assumptions about you. You have nothing else to do, therefore you can collect me, drop me off, pick me up, my grandkids, and so on and so on and so on. And people can find themselves trapped because they didn't say no. Some time ago I had a guy on a course and he said, I resent my daughter. I thought it was a bit strong. And he said, no, when I retired, she assumed that myself and my wife were going to mind the 3 kids. She took them out of creche and we were lumbered. So the things we wanted to do, we couldn't do. Our life was curtailed because in creche, she was fined if she didn't pick up the children on time. With us, it was, sure, it's mum and dad. A phone call, traffic's bad, can you hold on to them? I'm delayed at work, can I pick them up at 8 instead of 6? And suddenly he really started resenting his daughter. His solution, which you might say is a bit drastic, was to open 3 accounts and to charge his daughter half creche fees. He just put the money into 3 accounts for each of the kids. But it put manners on her that she started behaving more properly and they reclaimed their life. So really the saying no is don't get involved 5 days a week if you really only are prepared to do it 1. Start small and you can always increase. Much easier than starting big and trying to pull back. Choose when to retire if possible. So what, spring, summer, autumn, winter. In our experience, early in the year, this time of year is a much better time of year to retire. Days are getting longer, weather is getting better, people are in better humour, and it's not as drastic a transition as if it's autumn or winter. You need to decide who you are, and both previous speakers have referred to identity and who are you. And if you start describing yourself as I'm retired, people you talk to will blank. It's boring. You need to be thinking about what are you doing. If you're saying I'm planning a trip to wherever, oh yeah, I was there 3 years ago, or I knew somebody who, and you should see this and avoid that, and suddenly there's an interesting dialogue. So on our courses, we encourage people to make a list of their various identities, and you see some of them on the screen. And you then need to prioritise the identities that you want to have, what you want to be in the next stage of living. And if you're in a relationship, be very careful how you prioritise. Okay? You need to tap back into hobbies. So people used to do something, they've given it up, or there are new things that they want to take on. And the list of things on the left of the screen you need to consider, and try and find hobbies that address those things. Some hobbies will take them all in, others will be very specific. But mental, physical, group, individual, winter and summer. Try and cover all of those aspects. If you're thinking of taking up a new hobby, or if you're thinking of volunteering, one of the key words to think about and to hold in your mind is sample. Don't, if you have never played golf before, don't join a golf club, pay a membership, buy a set of clubs, and 3 weeks later find that you hate golf. Find somebody who's going to take you out for a round of golf, see if you like it, try a couple of courses, do it with different people, and if you like it, then join a golf club, buy the clubs, all the rest of it. In my own family, when my daughter was young, it was, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, can I have a pony?" And I said, "No, we'll borrow a helmet, you can wear your wellies, and we see if you like horses." We never bought a pony. Okay? So it's that kind of thing that you just need to think about before you commit. Be wary of developing bad habits. So really, when you've got time on your hands, it's very easy for these things to start falling into place. So, we're watching a movie, sure, we might as well open another bottle of wine. There's a lack of routine. I can stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning because I don't have to be up the next day. The next one is a real killer. I'm looking at the clock and I say, I've got to be over there in 15 minutes. Sure, it's not worth starting anything else. I'll make a pot of coffee, I'll grab another handful of biscuits, and suddenly you're grazing in a way that you would never do if you were at work. So the questions to ask yourself are, would I be doing this if I was at work? And is it healthy? And really, by just stopping being conscious of those things will tend to cut out the bad habits. Next tip is how you would use your skills and expertise elsewhere. So it might be volunteering, coaching, mentoring, part-time work, or working on. And just to be clear, in volunteering, start small. Don't give that big commitment and then find that you don't want to do it. Start small, and most organisations who use the services of volunteers will want as much time as you're prepared to give. How do you decide which organisation to volunteer with? Well, the kind of image I'll give you is you're walking down the street, there are people shaking boxes under your nose at regular intervals. Some boxes you will contribute to, other boxes you will happily walk past. Think of those organisations that you're prepared to contribute to financially, because they're organisations that you identify with in some way. You're likely to get much more out of volunteering if you volunteer with organisations you identify with, but the organisation is going to benefit as well if you're interested and committed. In shorthand, don't volunteer to rescue cats if you're really interested in third world poverty. Okay? Coaching and mentoring, two different things. Think of coaching as skills development. The sports coach is improving skills. Mentoring, think of as a trusted advisor, somebody that people can turn to for advice. Next thing is think about planning your routine. And routine, some people don't like the use of that word. You might think structure rather than routine. So what will a typical week look like? What will a typical month look like? And if you are in a partnership, think of joint activities and think of singular activities as well. Many people, when they retire, want to do everything together. And in that situation, conversation can die. So we're doing everything together. What's the point in talking about it? You were there. If you do separate things, wait till I tell you what happened today and you won't believe who I met, and conversation thrives. So do plan joint activities, but also plan things on your own. You do need to plan financially, and hopefully at this stage, anybody who's coming up to this has made provision for pension and knows where they are. But one of the key things to watch out for is what we would term miscellaneous expenditure. When you stop work, it is much easier to spend money. And money can leak away. It's a lunch today, it's another cup of coffee, it's a half a dozen books in the bookshop, there's a nice shirt, and so on. And suddenly, money is leaking away. So, what I would do and what we would do is encourage you to set a miscellaneous expenditure at whatever level that is, but a miscellaneous amount per month. And a bit like the ad on the radio, when it's gone, and you've got to wait till the next month to have your next miscellaneous expenditure. Travel, we would say do it while you can. Certainly if you're thinking of long-haul travel, the younger you do it, the easier it is. The older you are, the longer the recovery period. And lots of people put off travel for a 70th, 80th, 75th, some sort of big birthday event. We would say do it now, take loads of photographs, and on that birthday you can look at the photographs. Legal planning, you can imagine talking to the audience today about legal planning. People do need to have a will, probably have one. When did you last review it? Is it still relevant? Have you fallen out with one of the beneficiaries and you want to change it? And the key thing that we often talk about is enduring power of attorney. You know, as our solicitor who partakes in our courses says, when are you going to set it up? The day after you have the stroke? Okay? And sobering thought at the end, one of every couple will be single someday. So again, just thinking about what happens in the event of, do the wills work? You also need to think about the doomsday situation where both of you go in the same plane crash. What happens then? Resist bringing your work self home. So try to leave things at work. Resist the urge to control, to plan, to demand reports, to have meetings. And in a humorous way, avoid things like, where are you going? Do you have to? How long will you be? Oh, poor me, how long will you be? And worst of all, can I come too? Okay. Try to resist these things. The other things that you might think about are bringing work habits into your retirement. So we need to meet about that. Well, actually, no, we don't. Planning. I've just planned our holidays for the year. What do you mean? Well, I got a great deal on the internet, but I don't want to go there. Reporting. Why didn't you tell me you were going to do that? And control. By the way, who is in charge here anyway? Okay. One of the big things that we hear again and again is that guys in particular are big into time and motion. Things have happened happily, or maybe not quite so happily, but they've happened while the guy has been at work. And okay, I know this sounds old-fashioned and discriminatory, but it's not meant to be. It's just illustrating a story. So the guy retires and he suddenly starts watching what's happening at home, and he says, if I was doing that, I'd have started over there and I'd done that before that, and it'd be done in half the time. And the reaction is, okay. So just be very careful about how you talk, think, engage the brain first, I think is probably shorthand. Other issues that come up quite often are things like, okay, we're retired now, could we do away with one car? So there's a bit of a discussion around, and the answer to this question is always yes, provided minus the car that stays. Lots of people look at moving house. Should we downsize? This is now too big for us. Is it still appropriate for us? And in the Retirement Planning Council, we've produced a booklet called The First Time Seller's Guide in conjunction with Hunters Auctioneers. They have discovered a lot of people bought a house when they got married and have never ever sold a house. And often it's one partner has died and the other person is deciding to sell, but they haven't a clue how to sell. So this is a first-time seller's guide. But in general, we find that a lot of people spend a lot of time and effort looking to downsize, but don't actually do so. They think, we know the neighbours, we're embedded in the community, it's handy to get to the shop, the pub, the church, whatever it is. And yeah, we have a couple of spare bedrooms, but sure, the grandkids can come and stay, or the son who's in Australia will be coming home, or whatever. But they don't actually move house. Then there are domestic duties that need to be looked at: shopping, cleaning, gardening, ironing. If you really want some light relief, go onto YouTube and look up a video posted by an Irish guy called Kieran Blair. and the title of it is Let's Keep It Confidential. And essentially, this is about a talk about he and his wife deciding how the domestic duties were going to be reallocated, and he decided he was going to do the ironing. And the story develops from there. The first thing he wanted to do was read the ironing book. And his wife said, there's no such thing. He said, every electrical appliance comes with a book. So he hunted high and low, looked in the bottom drawer in the kitchen, found it still in its original plastic wrapper, and was dismayed to find that there were 68 pages in this book. However, he was relieved to find that only 8 of them were in English. And it goes on from there. But Ciarán Blair, Let's Keep It Confidential if you want. It's about a 7-minute video. Then things like minding relative children and grandchildren, touched on that with the guy who started to resent his daughter. But minding parents or siblings can also be a big issue. Because you retire, so let's backtrack a little bit. While you're working, there's a rota. You and your siblings have a rota you do every Wednesday night or whatever it is. You retire, and the other people on the rota think you've nothing else to do, so you can do much more. And you need to say, no, I'm prepared to do my share as always, or you might increase it a bit, but don't find yourself committed in a way that does not suit you. People will start taking you for granted unless you stand up for yourself. Relationships. 80% of our human contacts are at work, 20% are family and friends. So if you're leaving the world of work, you need to think, what percentage of the 80% will I retain? And there are people you work with and have worked with over the years you're quite happy to keep in contact with. You also know people you would be very happy if you never ever encountered them again. Okay? And you need to think about being active. So one of the comments we would get a lot is, while I was at work, the phone never stopped ringing. Now that I'm retired, the phone never rings. But the phone works 2 ways. If you want to keep in touch with people who are still working, make the call. You're low on their priority, particularly during the working week, but you need to make the call and set up whatever you want to set up. What new social networks will I join? You can still keep in contact with people in the evenings and the weekends, but who are you going to socialise with in the kind of 9 to 5 period? And that may be you need to develop new relationships, new social networks, sample them, try them, things that interest you, and your local library is a great source of what's on in your area. But do have real people to communicate with. Not everybody has a partnership, a partner, or is in a partnership. The number of single people is increasing by choice, by separation or divorce, or by bereavement. And working singles have a larger social network. And I think this is probably due to the fact that they don't have to go home. From work, they can go on and socialise. But very often, it's a bigger social network for single people. New social networks, new connections, see new opportunities, helps with that shift in your identity from what you are to what you want to be. You can try on new identities, you don't have any baggage, if you like. Build your confidence and self-esteem, and above all else, develop your sense of fun and engagement. You need to set boundaries, so plan for chunks of time, decide what you want to do. A book called Flourishing by Maureen Gaffney is a good read in this area, and she says you need to have a challenge, you need to be connected to society, you need to have autonomy, and you need to use your valued competencies. So really those 4 elements help you in terms of your future happiness and health. Flourishing by Maureen Gaffney. You do need to communicate, you do need time to adjust, you do need to develop a new structure, share ideas, so negotiate if you like, don't impose your views on others. And the road ahead in retirement is hopefully like this, flat, straight, stretching off a long way into the distance, maybe 30 years as we heard earlier. Sunny, bright, lovely day. Unfortunately, life doesn't tend to be like this. The road has twists and turns, humps and hollows, it rains, it snows, whatever. But by planning your retirement, by thinking about the kind of things we're talking about today, we're trying to make your retirement look as close to this image as possible. There are 3 things you need to think about: health, happiness and finance. And where those 3 intersect is the sweet spot that you're aiming for. This is slightly confused but meaningful too. So it's plotting challenge against skill. So if you're highly challenged and you're not using your skills, you'll be anxious, and you can read how it works. But the real key thing here is to get into the segment that's labelled flow. And by flow, we mean in your life to date, whether it's in work or outside work, you've been engaged in an activity where you haven't noticed the time pass. You've been so engaged, you look at your watch and you say, where did those 3 hours go? When the world of work is no more, where are you going to get that flow? Where are you going to get that engagement, that mental challenge, that skill usage that work gives you or has given you? And that's a real thing to think about. Where am I going to get that from if the world of work is no more? That might be volunteering, it might be changing career, it might be doing all the things we've talked about, but you really do need to find that. These are the elements that you need to think about for a really effective plan. So think differently, don't keep doing the same things. Plan for chunks of time, so not at 13 minutes past 11 I must be in the swimming pool, rather I'm going for a swim in the morning. Plan your daily routine, so have some structure, have some leisure pursuits, have something that's productive, do different things, so don't keep doing the same things. There's a pal of mine, when he got to 60, decided that every month he was going to do something different. So he's been in a hot air balloon, he's been the Viking splash, he's done all sorts of things, but every month he's doing something different just because he can. But it gives him that interest, that things to talk about, and so on. Enjoy what you've earned. You know the phrase, there's no pockets in a shroud. I've told my own kids, expect to inherit my debt. They won't, but if that's what they're expecting, they're going to be okay. And maintain a positive perspective. So the best example of positive perspective I came across was at a wedding, and I was sitting at a table with an elderly lady, define elderly, but a lady who was older than I, and she'd had rather a lot of gin to drink. And she turned to me and she said, I wonder, can you help me? And I said, if I can, I will. And she said, you know this thing about the glass half full and the glass half empty? I said, yes. She said, can you tell me, why don't they just fill the bloody glass? Positive attitude. Okay. In Trinity, the Irish longitudinal study on ageing, TILDA, has produced reports that say there are 3 key findings for a long, healthy and happy retirement. The first one is purpose. You need to have a reason for doing what you do. You need to have a mental challenge. So very often, mental challenge is what we get from work. And you need to have that social network of real people. So in your retirement, you need to think, where am I going to get these 3 things? Because you probably get them from work at the moment. You may get them from a hobby or a pastime. You may get them from sport. But more than likely, most of it comes from work. And if work is no more, where are you going to get these 3 things? You need to enjoy it. So we've heard earlier about the length of your retirement, how long it's likely to be. The probability of living to or beyond 90 is 47% for a man and 55% for a woman. So in other words, you can be almost as long retired as you were working. And that's a sobering thought for a lot of people. We kind of, traditionally, we would think we have a few years in retirement. You can have as many as 30 or 35. Mark Twain said, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. Throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbour, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. The next stage is full of opportunity, full of interesting things that you can do. Seize that opportunity. So what we talk about is really reinventing yourself. So you might think of the goldfish bowl on the left is the world of work where you're working with others. What we're looking at is designing the new goldfish bowl, and we're also looking at the trajectory that you actually land in the new goldfish bowl and don't miss it. Okay? There's also another line in there somewhere that I won't quote it, something to do with wind, but I won't know. And finally, remember you can't take your money with you. Enjoy what you've earned. The coming years are packed with opportunity. The text on the graphic is a little bit small. It says, missed opportunity. Yes, that train has left the station. No, there won't be another one. Okay, it's not a rehearsal. Have the time of your life. Thank you.
Hi there, how are you doing? Good afternoon. My name's Rory O'Bourne and I work here in the Law Society, and thanks for giving me a few moments to talk about what might be relevant to some. I know it won't be relevant to everybody, but it might interest some people. And I was saying to Shane, this is probably the happiest conference we run in the Law Society. Life after that interested me anyway. It sounded good to me. I run a master's course in advanced legal practice here, and I'm going to talk about that for a few minutes. And I also run a master's in employment law course, and I'm about to offer a professional doctorate in law as well. And why is it relevant to this group of individuals? I've run the course now for I'm going to talk about the Masters in Advanced Legal Practice in a moment, but why it might be relevant to this group is I've run the course for 4 years, and right from the outset what we discovered was that a lot of people who were well established in their career and indeed sort of coming to the end of their career and had mastered their own practice were actually interested in just coming back and looking at law from a more academic perspective. So actually, somewhat unusually for us, the age profile and the profile of experience, a lot of people, more senior practitioners, coming back in. So, for example, we've had 3 judges through the programme already. That type of court. Now, it's also appealing to younger qualified solicitors. I've done a survey on motivations. For those that are more established, it's that academic interest, that curiosity, that wanting to reflect on their own practice and their area of practice, and maybe also the potential of publishing to give back to the practice, to the overall community as well, publishing from your master's programme, because I think a lot of profession, we're very good at acquiring knowledge, but we're not always good at sharing it, not out of a sense of sort of like kind of selfishness or anything, but there's very few vehicles in which to actually disseminate knowledge acquired through your career, so it's just a thought. So that's by way of background. And again, the programme itself, the LLM Advanced Legal Practice, it's a dissertation-based master's. So although you come in here for initial induction day, you're then teamed up with a supervisor with whom you work with to complete the dissertation programme itself. It's in partnership with Northumbria University, and the connection there is that I used to lecture at Northumbria University. That's sort of what brought the programme over. And again, if you are interested, you'd be buddied up with a supervisor, either an academic or another practitioner with an interest in academics, the academic aspect of the particular topic you want to look at. A key to this is that it recognises the solicitor qualification. So it's a minor dissertation. So you, as your solicitor qualification, is accredited as 2/3 of the masters. So that's recognised by the university. This was entered into an agreement with the university. You have gone through the formal training yourself here. You've practiced, and that is recognised formally by the university as 120 of the 180 credits required for the master's programme. It's a 2-year programme with early exit points, and what I mean by that is every 6 months there is an exit point built into the programme. It dovetails with exam boards in Northumbria. So if you wanted to, for example, complete the programme within a year, that's a possibility as well. I've talked about the profile of students, particularly in the initial cohorts. We were quite kind of really surprised by the level of experience and the motivations of people that were presenting to do the course and complete the course. And I think it's fair to say I've really enjoyed it as well. The next intake is on 8th of September. That's broadly the structure of it. It's a project dissertation-based master's. Again, 2/3 prior credit, so it's really only a minor dissertation of 15 to 17,000 words. You choose the area you want to research. Again, most people choose an area that they've established a practice in. They're practicing and they're reflecting on it in a more academic setting. Other people go to hell. Like, I've done property law for 20 years. I was always interested in criminal law. I want to write about criminal law, and that's absolutely fine as well. Probably just means more work. Generally, the expectation is that you concentrate in an area of Irish law. Comparative analysis with other jurisdictions works really, really well. It's generally desk-based research, and by that we mean it's not gathering of data from living subjects, because that sometimes triggers ethical issues which can be more difficult to manage. Areas like anything that you can think of we've already thought about covering it. I work really hard to find supervisors that work for a given individual, either internally within the Law Society or externally. I haven't had to say no to anybody's project so far. Obviously, it has to come within the ambit of the programme, but that's just basically that it is an area of practice of law. If you are interested in the programme, my take-home point from that is that as you start the programme in September, you do not need to know for certain what it is you want to research. There's time built in within the programme whereby you can reflect on and think about what it is precisely you want to research. As I've said before, 180 credits, but you already have 120 credits because of your solicitor qualification. And I will ensure a supervisor is appointed to the student who is a suitably qualified supervisor and can assist in the production of the minor thesis. Next intake, 28th of September, €3,400 is the price. Application forms are online through the Diploma Centre, and again, you don't have to know your topic. Also, we've got an LLM Employment Law and Practice. It's a very similar structure, but it's for the prior credit applies to those who have completed the Diploma in Employment Law. And then starting in May, on a pilot basis, we're introducing a professional doctorate in law as well. It will be 3.5 years on a part-time blended learning basis. The idea is to produce a thesis or portfolio of original quality in a professional area. And ultimately what we're trying to do is, again, that idea of sharing knowledge with the professionals to disseminate, publish that research and its outcomes to the professional audience. There's one small taught element, advanced research methods module that would involve 2 weekend sessions here in the Law Society. We try to limit that, but again, it's very much about dissertation-based, the production of a thesis. You get to develop your proposal through year one as well. The entry level to that is that you've either completed a master's level degree within the last 5 years and is also open to those with professional experience in law, professional experience in law, and the route in is via interview with Professor Elaine Hall, which we work with from Northumbria. The fee is €5,000 a year. We start on a pilot basis in May. That programme is more or less full at the moment. We might have 1 or 2 places, but realistically the next intake would be May 2020. That's it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I believe I'm the only woman that was here today, and now I'm facing all these legal eagles. I'm actually a little bit nervous, and not that I get nervous normally, but I am. I hope I don't say the wrong thing. Anyway, my name is May Quaid. I've been in active retirement for the last 20 years. Well, how will I say it? I'm retired 33 years. So there you go. So I'm living proof that you can stay retired. I'm perfectly healthy, except for a wonky knee that I got replaced. Other than that, I have no aches and pains and I'm grand. So you have all this to look forward to. Active retirement it stays connected with for a healthy retirement. We have actually, it's a company. We also have, it was founded in 1978 in Dún Laoghaire, and they celebrated their 40th anniversary last year, so they're still going strong. It depends on what you want from active retirement. We have 550 local groups, and each group is autonomous. It's not interfered. But as I say, we do have a national AGM every year, and the local group is self-managed. We have 25,500 members, and they're all aged between 55 and 102. Now, I'm not quite 102, but I'm not too far away from it. So if I retired 33 years ago, I was 45. You can work that out. So they have exercises, yoga. It depends on what you want. They do all that sort of thing. They go on trips. They organise their own activities. They go on continental holidays. One group I know at the moment are in Portugal on a walking holiday. So, there's different things. It depends what you need. Now, they do have a committee. They have a constitution. And they can only hold office, sort of the chair, the secretary and the treasurer can only hold office for 3 years, because people sometimes get power and you can't get it off them. And local or older people, I should say, sometimes, if they haven't had power in their job, they suddenly get this and they decide, oh, right, I'm going to run this. So it's one way of moving them on. So the activities are all based on members' needs. Some people, as I say, like to walk. Some people like to run marathons or whatever. Now, I wouldn't be able to run a marathon, but I'm well able to shop. That's the only thing I can do, and play golf. So there's a bowling tournament. There's a lot of them into bowling, and they have a national tournament every year, and it alternates between Briefy House in Castlebar and Killarney. And I got into ferocious trouble one time. I know nothing about bowls. And I was the national president at the time. And of course, I thought I was gorgeous, tripping along in a pair of high heels. And off I walked down the mat. Well, I was nearly assassinated because I didn't realise that you shouldn't be doing any of those things. There's a lot of cultural stuff. I'm sure you guys would be more interested in the cultural stuff, would you? I wouldn't. I'm a very bad person. They go to museums. I find them extremely boring. Government buildings. The only time I like to go in there is when I'm fighting with the local TDs or whatever about my pension or the lack of what I'm not getting. But we're not too badly paid now. I don't know whether when you're 66, you get 238 euros a week. It's not bad, It really isn't bad. People moan and groan about it. But then if you have to live on that without a private pension, it can be quite difficult. But basically, I think we're the best paid in Europe, to be honest. And I go to the post office every week for mine. My husband thinks I'm crazy. He gets his paid into the bank. But if you think about that, the government were very clever. They told people to get it paid into the bank. What did that mean? The post offices could close down. You see, you have to be thinking about these fellas all the time. You'd want to be with it. So I go every week, and I know Mick in the post office, and he tells me all the gossip that's going on in the town. And if I mightn't be around, I hear everything. And then I come home and I have money in my hand. I just like money. Going into the bank wouldn't mean anything to me. I just like money. So there you go. They do a lot of physical exercises. I don't do that either. But a lot of people do that. I'm an incredibly lazy person. You've no idea. I only like shops. I told you that. And I get tired going around them too. The bowling. I don't swim. I walk on the golf course. There's lifelong learning. I read books. I was away recently for a month and I read 20 books. In another life, years and years ago in London, I was a proofreader and I can speed read. So I read 20 books. I really loved it. And I don't get time to do that at home. So I'm considering another month's holidays on my pension. So the Fáilte Isteach programme is very good. And I also learnt my computer training. We do a lot of this with the transition year students, and you go in on a one-to-one basis and there's a kid of 17 telling you what to do, and they probably think you're from outer space or something, but it was great. I got my certificate, came home and waved it at my husband, who was actually an IT specialist, so he wasn't a bit impressed with me at all. I could suddenly book my flight to wherever I wanted to go. So There's social networking. Depends on what you want to do. There's tea dances. I don't like them either. I'm into the Rolling Stones. People forget that people of my age are the rock and rollers. And I dread going into a dance where it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I have a pain in my leg after 5 minutes. So I just love rock and roll or anything like that. Because who do they think we are? Sometimes when you're over 65, they think everything up here is gone, dead. So there's coffee mornings. I don't drink coffee. I'm very bold now, but there's all those things there for you if you want to do it, and leisure activities. Travel, I do a lot of that, all right. And all aimed at reducing loneliness and isolation, learning new skills and meeting new people. Now, loneliness and isolation can happen if you're living in the middle of O'Connell Street, say. You don't know who your neighbour is. And there are lonely people all around this country, particularly in rural areas as well. I mean, I live in the country, and I'm very guilty in that 2 doors up from me, the ambulance arrived last Saturday morning for a gentleman. I don't even know that man's name. Isn't that a disgraceful thing to have to admit? I really don't know him. And I suddenly felt extremely guilty. I know he lives there on his own, but I don't even know if the poor man is ill in hospital. There's nobody I can ask. And I said to myself, I'm going to have to just start finding out what's going on around me. It's not that, I just don't have time. I know that sounds awful, but I'm never at home. So anyway, it's something that we should all be very wary of. And you're all going to retire now, I believe. Are you now? For the gentleman here, please do not expect that your wife is going to be there to get your lunch. My husband, when he retired 19 years ago, arrived home. He had a very high-powered job. He was always at conferences and God knows what. He arrives home and he says to me, May, what's for lunch? I said, now sit down in that chair. I said, because I don't do lunch. And I said, as a matter of fact, I really don't do dinner either, because I mightn't be here and you were out. So he actually learned to cook. And he's much better at it than I am, and I hate it anyway, and I hate food shopping. So he does all that sort of thing now, and he's a very happy camper. But, you suddenly can't appear in your home. I don't know whether I should be talking about the reverse now. The woman can't go home either and expect the man to be doing whatever. But it's mostly men who do this. They come home and expect you to be there. No bloody way. Why should you be there? You've lived your own life. If you've only been at home, well, your wives may have worked, I don't know. But they've been doing their own thing for 40 years. And suddenly this person appears in the door and they want, can I have this and can I have that? That's all very well, but it's not great. And listen, if you're going to move house, don't do it immediately. That's terrifying. And if you do move, buy a bungalow. Because as you get older, you can't get up the stairs. Or you have to buy a chairlift, and that costs a lot of money. I was looking at that guy talking about the price of your course. That's a lot of money. But, some people might want to do that. But a chairlift or any of those other things cost a lot. And I hope you all have health insurance. That's a major thing. When my husband retired, he had never been ill. Since that time, he's had a double bypass, 2 hip replacements, a hole in his eye, 2 stents, a replacement valve and a pacemaker. And he's still around. I can't get the blooming insurance money at all. But anyway, I'm married 59 years. So I suppose it's a bit of a record. We met when we were 17, we got married when we were 19. And we were married in 1960. So 59 years in August we're married. Next year I'm hanging on for the diamonds because, that's the diamond anniversary. But, retirement doesn't suit everybody. I was just telling, was I telling you, Shane? Yeah. No, I wasn't. I don't know who I was telling. That's another thing, your memory goes as well. But this friend of mine, she's a county councillor, met this guy in the supermarket, and she kept meeting him. I think it was you, Shane, I was telling. He was in Tesco's in Arklow, and he kept buying a loaf of bread, and then he was gone. And the next thing she saw him 2 or 3 days later, he was buying another loaf of bread. And she said, "What the hell are you doing in here?" And he said, "I just want to come here to talk to people." And you see, that happens to some people. They don't cope with retirement. When I finished work, I was an air hostess back in the day, back in London a long, long time ago, 1960 actually. And I've always been able to survive, but not everybody is able to do that. I joined all these committees. I'm the company secretary of Wicklow Tourism. I'm on the LCDC. Do you know what that is? The Local Community Development Committee with the County Council. I'm on the PPN. Do you know what that is? People's Participation Network. That's a very good thing for you guys to join. Phil Hogan set it up before he went to Europe, and it's to take away the power of the county councils. It doesn't really, but at least you have a voice. I chair the Older People's Network in Wicklow, and I do all sorts of other things, and then I play golf as well. Not great anymore. I used to be good, but I'm not anymore. But, you do need all that sort of stuff. Volunteering is great. But as I was talking to two very nice people outside, and I was telling them I'm on a committee with the HSE, and they seem to think that volunteers should do everything. And I said to them, well, you're bloody well paid for what you do. We don't get anything. But they expect you to do it. Volunteering is great, but I'd be choosy about what I do. And, enjoy your life. What you really need is a laugh. I told a very bad story. Will I tell it? Not that one, I'll tell the other one. I had this Greek lady came to one of our seminars, and she said to me, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? She was all excited. And I said to her, I have no idea what you're going to say. So she suddenly stood up in front of everyone, and there was 200 people in the room, very rural, elderly people. And she says, isn't it wonderful looking at you people? You can all have sex without getting pregnant. Well, I thought we were going to empty the room, but they actually enjoyed her. But I mean, it is a bit scary when somebody comes out with that and you don't know what the reaction is. But she broke the ice. She told some great... Are you getting rid of me?
No.
That's all right. But anyway, look, enjoy retirement. Life is for living. Have a fun. That's what you really need to do. Go and, I suppose in the first year you want to travel and do things like that. I've been to Africa and all these places. I've done it all. And, then you get a bit fed up. All this blooming stuff at the airport where you have to be, your bag has to be opened and you're going along and you can only take, it ruins me. I need about 7 suitcases and I can only take one. But, it's just retirement. Take it easy. Think about what you're doing. Don't get out of your house. Don't move off somewhere where you don't know anybody, because that's disastrous. We moved back to Baltinglass. I'm a Dobb, by the way. I was brought up in Leeson Street. No, it wasn't like it was now. Oh no, it was different. And when we went to London to live, and when I came back, my husband landed me in Baltinglass. I thought I was in hell. I couldn't believe it. The shops didn't open till 10 o'clock, and, it was a very sleepy little place. But when we moved back to Dublin and we wanted to retire, where did we go? Back to Baltinglass. But anyway, look, folks, enjoy your life. Life is for living, and have a ball, and thank you very much for your attention.
Going to have a quick run through pensions. Okay, and let's see if I can get this working. So what we'll cover today, the financial... I have quite a few slides here, a limited amount of time, so I'm going to go through them very quickly. But feel free to ask questions as I go along. So the financial effects of retiring, the state pension and your retirement options. Getting the most from your pension. Financial effects of retirement. The main source of income for people over the age of 65 is the pension they build up with their employers, or for self-employed people in their personal pensions. The main source is actually, on average, the state pension. makes up 63% of most people's pension in retirement, 16% from personal pensions or occupational pensions. And obviously people continue earning in retirement, and then you might have dividend income or rental income or something. Average life expectancy from birth of an Irish man is 78 and an Irish woman is 83. So, on average, the men in this room can expect to live to age 78 and the women to age 83. True or false? False, exactly. Because you've lived this long, you're likely to live longer. So, effectively, men should make it past 80 and women past 85. Now, I think you've already covered that anyway. I think that was pointed out to you earlier on. Okay. And also, generally, you tend to be better off than the average Irish person because you may have some pensions in place. The state pension, how much is it? At the moment, it's going to be, for a single person, there's two state pensions. There's the contributory and non-contributory. Okay? There was a time when self-employed people didn't qualify for the contributory. Now they do. The contributory pension is now €248.30 per week. If you have a qualified adult under age 66, it's an additional €165.40 per week, and a qualified adult over age 66, €222.50 per week. Payable from age 66, and depending on your age, it's going up to age 68. Okay? You can have one or the other, but not both. Everybody all right with that? In terms of the cost of providing the state pension, you'll have seen probably something in the paper recently where they're talking about restricting future increases to CPI. Okay? And the reason for that is, obviously, as you're probably aware, the state pension is paid out of current expenditure. The government take in tax and pay out pensions. They don't have a separate fund for the state pension. So it's down to having a sufficient number of people working so that they can afford to continue to pay it. All right? The ratio at the moment is about 4 to 5 to 1 people working for everybody in receipt of it, and they expect that that's going to go down as the population ages. And that's going to make it more difficult to sustain in the long term. So what's likely to happen? They can reduce the pension. They can not increase it in line with inflation, so overall that the value of it goes down. They can push out the date at which you receive it further again. Okay, I find the nearer I get to it, the further they move it away from. They can increase taxes to pay for it, or they can make it more difficult to qualify. Now, an awful lot of those are going to be very unpalatable to politicians. As you can imagine, they'll feel it's a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas, you know. And we've seen what can happen when those people who are retired decide to get active, shall we say. We saw that with the medical card. Remember, they were all out protesting. Okay? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to this down the line. It's reasonable to expect that the value of the state pension will probably be, in real terms, less as time goes on. Okay? Your options at retirement. So if you have a pension fund, what can you do with it? You can take a certain amount of it tax-free, generally. Okay? And there are different ways of calculating it, but for the most part, on personal pensions, you can take a quarter of the value of your fund as a lump sum. And depending on how big that is, you'll get a certain amount of it tax-free, and some of it will be taxed at 20%. With the balance, you can either purchase an annuity or invest in what they call an approved retirement fund, an ARF. The 25%, as I said, if your fund is €100,000, 25% of it is 25 grand, you'll get that tax-free. If your fund is €800,000, 25% of it is 200,000, you'll get that tax-free. If your fund is $1 million, 25% of it is 250,000. The first 200,000 is tax-free. The balance of 50,000 is taxed at 20%, so what you get into your hand is 240,000. That make sense? Yeah? And so on, up to a maximum of 2 million. So the maximum lump sum you can get that gets preferential tax treatment is €500,000. So 200,000 tax-free, the next 300,000 is taxed at 20%. Anything after that is taxed at your marginal rate of tax. Tax and PRSI and so forth will apply. With the balance, you had two options, as I said. The first is to buy an annuity. You'll all be aware, an annuity, fancy name for a pension. What you do is you take the balance of your fund and you go to an insurance company and you give them the fund and they agree to pay you a pension for as long as you live. Okay? So I have a fund of 400,000, I take 100,000 tax-free, and with my 300,000 I go down to whoever, Irish Life, Aviva, whoever, and I give them the 300,000 and they agree to pay me a pension for as long as I live. Now, the rate of pension I get will depend on a number of things. It's going to depend on my age because they take average life expectancy into account. Okay? To this extent, the insurance company are a bit like a casino. The house always wins. They work out an average life expectancy. And they set the rate accordingly. Now, some people will live longer, but some people will die sooner. So from their perspective, it all balances out. From my perspective, I need to live long enough to collect my money. If I don't, it dies with me, unless I'm married. And I can include a spouse's pension. But on the rare occasion that my wife and myself hold hands, if we're holding hands crossing the road and we get hit by a truck, that's it. It's gone. Okay? The other thing that it's linked to are interest rates. The insurance companies, when they take that money, they don't stick it in a drawer. They invest it. But because they're guaranteeing me a pension for as long as I live, they're investing it in very low-risk investments. So they invest in what are known as AAA-rated long bonds. Bonds, as we all know after the financial crisis, are loans, so loans to governments. AAA rated means essentially it's German, French and Dutch bonds, and long bonds means they're about 20 years in duration. And at the moment they're at historic lows. Okay? So 10, 12 years ago, a 65-year-old with 100 grand would have gotten a pension of around 8 grand a year. Today, a 65-year-old with 100 grand would get a pension of around 3,500 to 4,000 a year. Okay? And you buy the annuity at the rate that's available on the day. I compare it a bit to buying a washing machine. You go into Power City and you spend €300 on a washing machine, and a couple of weeks later you're passing and you see it for sale in the window at 200. You can't go in and ask for your €100 back. Okay? So it's the rate that's available on the day. Okay? The advantage of the annuity is that you have certainty of income. They're guaranteeing to pay you the income for as long as you live. So if the gene pool is pretty good, you come from a long line of long livers, it might be to your advantage, and it's guaranteed. The disadvantage is it dies with you. It's not inheritable. You can't pass, if after 5 years you die and 5 years later your spouse dies, there's nothing left over to be passed on to the estate. That make sense? Okay. Instead of that, you can invest in an approved retirement fund. The approved retirement fund, as I was saying, essentially it's an investment fund. Okay? You invest the money, and there's a whole range of them available. You can have any level of risk that you want. It can all go into cash on deposit, if you wish. Okay? But again, you're earning nothing on it. You can use it to buy shares. You can use it to buy property, or you can go for a managed fund that has a mix of assets. Okay? The advantages of it are that obviously it's inheritable. So I take my 300,000 and I put it into an approved retirement fund. In terms of the deemed drawdown, there's a certain amount I have to take every year. I can take as much as I want if I'm in receipt of the full state pension. I can take as much of it as I want as income, okay? But I must take at least 4%. Once I turn 70, I must take at least 5% per annum. Generally, so if I take the example of I have a fund of 400,000, I take €100,000 as tax-free cash, and I have 300,000 left over. So if I take 4% of that, that's 12 grand a year. So if I take that out every year, £1,000 a month, okay, as income. I have the money invested on a relatively low-risk investment approach. It earns about 2% per annum. I get £1,000 a year for about 30 years, maybe a little over, or £1,000 a month for around 30 years before the pot runs out. Okay? Given that I'm taking out 4% and it's only growing at 2%. Okay? If I die, my wife takes over. And she continues to take £1,000 a month. She doesn't have to take a reduction in the income. And then if she dies, whatever's left in the pot goes to the estate, so that my daughter will inherit. Okay? So again, on the rare occasion that we hold hands and we're crossing the road and the two of us get hit by the truck, well, it's probably my daughter driving it first of all, but she'll inherit. That makes sense? So, as I was saying, essentially what you have here is money goes into the approved retirement fund. If you don't have the guaranteed income for life of $12,000 per annum, or $12,700 per annum, you must put $63,500 into an approved minimum retirement fund. You can you must draw down 4% from the approved retirement fund as a minimum. Now, when I say you must draw it down, as you said, the revenue says deemed drawdown. So if you don't take it, they're going to tax you on 4%. You don't have to, but they'll tax you on it, so you may as well. The advantages, again, depending on how you invest the money, it may grow at a higher rate than the amount you're drawing out, but that does involve taking more risk. It can be inherited, and if it is inherited, it's subject to 30% tax. Now, depending on the age of the person who inherits, it's either treated as inheritance tax or a separate income tax at a special rate of 30%. Okay? The disadvantages. The money may run out before you do. Okay? So if you're drawing down 4% per annum and you take a high-risk investment strategy and the actual fund starts to decrease rather than grow, you might use up the pot sooner than you would hope. Either that or you have to start taking a lower level of income. Okay? That make sense? So it's not guaranteed. The annuity, to be fair, is guaranteed, but the rates are appalling. The approved retirement fund, at least it's inheritable, but it's not guaranteed. As I said, there's a broad range of investment options, deposits, investments in shares, properties. You have these managed funds. Generally, you would sit down and decide what level of risk you're comfortable with, and then go according to that. Okay? Also, situation with an approved retirement fund, they talk here about levels and timing of income required. You have a situation where, with an annuity, it's guaranteed for as long as you live. And if your health deteriorates after taking it out, well, the rate isn't going to change. You're still going to get the same level of annuity, irrespective of your state of health after buying it. With an approved retirement fund, that's not the case. So if you get a call from your GP saying that world cruise you were planning on taking in 5 years' time, you should take it now, you can start drawing the money down at a faster rate. Okay? So the kids get no inheritance.
Can you shift from an annuity to an ARF?
No. You can go from an ARF to an annuity, but you can't go the other way. So if you invest initially in an approved retirement fund, and then you subsequently decide interest rates go up and there's very good value on annuity rates now, you can take what's left in your approved retirement fund and go and buy an annuity. And you're going to be older, so you'll get a better rate anyway. So, that option is there. But once you buy the annuity, that's it, you're locked in.
Can you split it from the start?
You can, yeah. And some people do. So that option is available. This just shows what I said earlier. If it doesn't grow and you're taking €100,000 with 4%, so you take £4,000 a year, it doesn't grow, obviously it's going to last 25 years. Okay, divide 100 by 4, that's 25. If it grows at 2%, it's going to last 35 years. So a quick rundown through advantages and disadvantages. With an annuity, the income is guaranteed for life. With an ARF, it could run out before you do. Tax treatment, annuity subject to income tax and universal social charge, not subject to PRSI. The income from the approved retirement fund is income tax and universal social charge, but up to the point of state pension age, it's also subject to PRSI. In terms of the value, the annuity is fixed. Your ARF can go up or down depending on investment performance. Inheritability, when they say limited there, what they mean is that you can build in a spouse's pension. So a pension is paid to your spouse for as long as he or she lives after your death. With the approved retirement fund, it can be inherited by your children. The lump sum, 25% generally, but if you're in employment and you're working, you're a part of an occupational pension scheme, you can also use a formula based on salary and service. Okay, so if my salary is 50 grand and I have at least 20 years service, I can take 1.5 times my final salary as a lump sum, which is 75,000. If my fund is 200,000, a quarter of my fund is 50,000. So I have a difference there of 75,000 versus 50,000. Okay, so it seems more attractive to take the 75,000. However, if I do that, because the amount I'm taking is greater than 25% of the fund, I must buy an annuity with the balance. Okay? So in some cases, people take the lower amount because they want to invest in an approved retirement fund rather than buying an annuity. That make sense? Tax relief, as I said, you get tax relief at your marginal rate. So if you're paying tax at 20%, you invest €100, it costs you €80 out of your take-home pay. If you're paying tax at 40, you invest 100, it costs you €60 out of your take-home pay. In terms of deciding your investment strategy, the general rule is the younger you are, the more risk you take. Okay? And what used to happen was they would arrange that by the time, normal retirement age, let's say, was 65, so by the time you got to 65, you had no risk whatsoever on the basis that that was the end of your investment period. With approved retirement funds now, however, the investment period goes on, hopefully for another 20 or 30 years. So it's important you get advice on the investment strategy you're taking. You would look at things like how long you have to go to retire, what your tolerance for risk is, what your overall financial circumstances are. You may have some people who have quite a lot of other assets, so they can afford to take more risk with their pension fund. Some people might not have other assets, so their pension fund is very important to them. So, they might want to take less risk. Okay? You need to factor all those things into your decision-making process. That make sense? If you're taking a high-risk approach, this could happen. Okay, it's going up then 2007, 2008. That would sort of represent what happened there, that fall. Okay, and markets have recovered since. Okay, the issue is what happens if you're going to retire here. Okay, and you're in a high-risk strategy and your fund falls the year before you're due to retire. You obviously have less money available. And from the point of view that 75% of it is possibly going to go into an approved retirement fund and continue to be invested, that may well recover in value. But the point is that your 25% lump sum is going to be considerably reduced because the overall value of your fund has gone down at the point of retirement. That make sense? So generally what we recommend is that you take some sort of approach to move to more conservative assets, not necessarily no risk whatsoever, but that you reduce the level of risk as you're getting towards retirement age. Now, there are systems out there that will do that for you. They're generally called lifestyling systems, okay? And a lot of them now will allow you to select a particular age at which you expect to retire, and that the risk will gradually be reduced as you approach that age. So, I could have an expected retirement age of 65. Stuart, who's here with me to make sure I don't say anything out of the way, could have an expected retirement age of 67. And that the funds would be managed differently to cater for that. Okay? So those facilities are available. As I said, generally, if you're a good distance from retirement, you would expect to take higher risk. As you approach retirement age, you'd expect to take lower risk. And again, depending then over the last while, it really depends on how you're going to take your benefits. So generally what you would expect is, as you're going to take the 25% as a lump sum, you would expect that at least 25% of the fund would be invested in cash. And then, depending on whether or not you were going to buy an annuity or invest in an approved retirement fund, the remaining 75% would either be invested in government bonds or in what we would say a cautious growth fund. And the idea with the government bonds is that as interest rates go down, the value of the bond goes up, so that the amount of pension you get should remain stable. Similarly, if interest rates go up, the bond value goes down, but you're getting a higher interest rate on it, so again, there shouldn't be much change in the amount of pension. Okay? That's why they'd use bonds for that if you're going to buy an annuity. Okay? I work for Mercer, and Mercer run a scheme for the Law Society. It's the Law Society Retirement Trust Scheme. It's very transparent. 100% of your money is invested. There's an independent trustee oversees the governance and the investment decisions. As I said, transparent charging, no charges applied to the contributions or on exit. Full flexibility as to how and when you make contributions. And as I've mentioned about lifestyle strategies, there was new ones introduced in 2018. You have online access. This is a typical lifestyle strategy as you approach retirement age. Okay? It starts you off, and this is the way the Law Society scheme runs, it starts you off in the managed fund, which would be medium to medium high risk. Then as you approach retirement age, they gradually start moving you out of that into cash and a mix of short duration bonds and the managed fund, which would equate to a sort of a cautious growth strategy. And you can see how it's done. This is for somebody retiring at age 65, and you can see how it's reduced over the last 7 years. Okay. In terms of management charges, if you're looking at it, it's extremely competitive. For people who are getting close to retirement and want to move all their money into cash, the management charge is 0.12%. You can generally expect to be paying 0.75 to 1% per annum on the open market. Mm-hmm. The rest of the funds then, the long bond fund is 0.3, the absolute return fixed income fund is 0.54, diversified equity fund is 0.94, and the managed fund 0.86. Okay, so in terms of the costing, it's very competitive. You'll have gone through some of this already with some of the previous speakers, but we would recommend that you should identify the sources of your income in retirement. Okay, so where are you going to get income? Your own pension plan, the state pension. If you have worked for previous employers where there are pension benefits, you need to get details on that, and obviously your savings. So, benefit statements from the pension plan, you'd write to if you had a previous employer, you'd write to them asking for a benefit statement. State pension, you contact the Department of Social Protection to see what level of state pension you're entitled to. Okay? They have what they call for pensions a standard fund threshold of €2 million. And essentially what it means is you can't really build up a pension of much beyond that. In practical terms, you can go for 2.15 million. Okay? There's a tax payable, but the tax can be offset by the 20% you pay on. Remember I was talking about the lump sum? It could be 500,000. You get 200,000 tax-free, and 300,000 is taxed at 20%. That 20% of 500,000 is 60 grand. That can be offset against any tax payable on an amount in excess of the 2 million. So effectively you could have 2.15 million. Okay? Budgeting. Okay? So, consider increasing contributions to increase the pension you're going to receive in retirement, if you have time. Take account of the tax relief you're going to get, and maximising the lump sum. Estimate total household retirement income. So what income are you going to have in retirement? How much are you going to spend? And then how you want to balance it up. You should always also take account, obviously, of health insurance. And you probably had somebody speaking to you about this earlier, but it's well worth looking at some of the websites that compare various health insurance policies that are available. Because there's a huge amount of health insurance policies available now, and it will make your head spin. Okay, so that's it. We left the leaflet out on the bench there, about the Law Society bench scheme, if you want to pick it up on the way out. I'm quite happy to hang around and answer any questions you have on an individual basis. I've also left some business cards out there. If you're in a rush and you want to head off and you want to contact me later, by all means. All right?